There's a moment on the first day of Marine Corps boot camp when a young man or woman steps off a bus, plants their feet on a set of yellow footprints painted on the concrete, and realizes with absolute certainty that their old life is over. The person they were when they woke up that morning no longer exists. What comes next is 13 weeks of the most intense, most deliberate, most psychologically calculated transformation process in the entire United States military. And the recruits who survive it will tell you years later that it changed them at the cellular level, that it rewired something deep, that they became a different kind of human being on the other side. This is not a story about obstacle courses. This is not a story about push-ups and yelling. This is a story about how the Marine Corps takes ordinary American teenagers and young adults, people who just weeks ago were working fast food jobs and scrolling social media, and systematically breaks them down, strips them bare, and rebuilds them from the ground up into United States Marines. And the process is so precise, so refined over more than 200 years of institutional history that it works at a rate that would shock most people who have never experienced it. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe if you have not already. Over 98% of people watching this video have not subscribed yet. It costs you nothing and it means everything to channels that are trying to bring you this kind of content. Hit that button now and let's get into this. The Marine Corps is the smallest of the four main branches of the United States military. It is smaller than the Army, smaller than the Navy, smaller than the Air Force, but it has a reputation that is wildly disproportionate to its size. There is a reason for that, and that reason begins at the place every single Marine has passed through: Parris Island, South Carolina, or San Diego, California. 2 recruit depots, 2 proving grounds, 1 standard, and that standard is brutal. Let me be direct about something. The Marine Corps does not believe in gradual adjustment. It does not believe in easing recruits into the process. From the very first second a recruit steps onto that base, the entire environment is designed to dismantle the identity they arrived with and begin constructing something new. That process is not accidental. It is not arbitrary cruelty. It is one of the most carefully engineered psychological and physical programs that any institution anywhere in the world has ever developed. And understanding exactly how it works, step by step, week by week, challenge by challenge, is what we are going to do today. So let us start where every Marine story starts: the day they arrive. Nobody arrives at Marine Corps boot camp in daylight. That is intentional. The buses pull in late at night, sometimes in the early hours of the morning, and the darkness is the first tool the drill instructors use. When you cannot see your full surroundings, when you are disoriented by travel and time and anxiety, you are already vulnerable. You are already off balance, and that is exactly where the Marine Corps wants you. The bus stops, and before most recruits even understand what is happening, the door flies open and a drill instructor gets on that bus and begins screaming. Not asking, not instructing, screaming, "Get off my bus! Move, 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 let's go now, right now!" And every recruit, no matter how tough they thought they were when they signed that contract, feels something shift inside them, because this is real, this is actually happening. And the person yelling at them is not joking, not performing, and not going to stop. The recruits scramble off the bus and find themselves standing on yellow footprints. Those footprints are famous. They are painted on the concrete in precise formation, and every recruit must stand on a set of them immediately. The footprints force the recruits into a formation before they have ever been taught what a formation is. It is their first experience of military order, and it happens within 60 seconds of arrival, before they have had a chance to think about it, before their brain can resist it. From that moment forward, time collapses. The recruits are processed with machine-like efficiency. They surrender everything they brought from their civilian lives: cell phones, personal clothing, snacks, books, anything that connected them to who they were before. All of it gets boxed up and sent home or locked away. What they are left with is nothing. No personal items, no comfort objects, no familiar anchors to the world outside. That is not an accident. The Marine Corps understands that identity is tied to objects, to routines, to personal choices. Strip all of that away and you strip the identity with it, and into that empty space something new can be built. They are given haircuts. For male recruits, this is one of the most psychologically significant moments of arrival night, and most of them do not anticipate how powerful it will feel. The barber does not ask how they want it. The barber does not make conversation. Within about 45 seconds, whatever hairstyle a recruit had, whatever look they cultivated, whatever small piece of personal expression their hair represented is gone. Completely gone. And when they look at the man next to them and see the same thing, they begin the first stage of a process the Marine Corps is extremely deliberate about. They begin to understand that they are not individuals here. They are part of something larger. And that understanding, planted on the very first night, will grow and deepen over the next 13 weeks until it becomes genuine conviction. They receive their uniforms, their recruit gear. their boots. And now, standing in formation in identical clothing with identical haircuts, surrounded by strangers who are all equally lost and frightened, the transformation has already begun, they just do not know it yet. If you have ever talked to a Marine and asked them what arrival night felt like, almost every single one of them will pause before they answer, because the memory is visceral, it does not fade, it is burned into them. One veteran Marine described it this way: "I thought I was ready, I had been working out for months, I had read about it, I had watched videos. And the second I stepped off that bus, I realized I knew absolutely nothing. It was like being dropped into another dimension where every rule I had ever known about how the world worked simply did not apply anymore." That feeling, that total disorientation, that complete stripping away of the familiar, is the foundation of everything that comes next. Phase 1 of recruit training at both Paris Island and San Diego covers roughly the first 3 weeks. And if arrival night is a shock, Phase 1 is a sustained siege. There is no moment of relief, there is no settling in period. The drill instructors maintain a level of intensity that would seem unsustainable to anyone who has not experienced it, but it does not break. It continues, day after day, hour after hour. The recruits learn to move as a unit. They learn to respond to commands instantly, without hesitation, without thinking. The Marine Corps places enormous weight on immediate physical obedience, and that might sound simple from the outside, but it is extraordinarily difficult to achieve with a group of young civilians who have spent their entire lives making their own decisions about when to move, when to speak, when to eat, when to sleep. Every one of those autonomous decisions is taken away. In boot camp, you eat when you are told, you sleep when you are told, you speak when you are told and only what you are told to say, you stand when you are told, you sit when you are told, you do not decide anything about your physical existence without permission. This is not about degrading the recruits, this is about creating a reflex. In combat, the ability to respond to an order without hesitation is not a nicety, it is a survival skill. It is the difference between a unit that functions under fire and a group of panicked individuals who freeze when everything goes wrong. Phase 1 is where that reflex is first installed, and the installation is painful. The physical training in Phase 1 is relentless. The recruits wake up early, earlier than most people reading this have ever chosen to wake up voluntarily, and from that moment until they collapse into their racks at night, their bodies are being pushed. Running, calisthenics, obstacle courses, pugil stick fights, circuit training, swimming qualifications, the Marine Corps physical fitness test, the combat fitness test, hikes with full packs. And in between all of that, the classroom work, the instruction, the hours of learning Marine Corps history and customs and courtesies and the uniform code of military justice. There is almost no downtime in Phase 1. When there appears to be downtime, that is when recruits learn to use it for maintenance. Cleaning their weapons, polishing their boots, squaring away their gear, because in the Marine Corps a moment of idle hands is a failure of discipline. The recruits learn this lesson very quickly. The drill instructors in Phase 1 are a presence unlike anything most recruits have ever encountered. They are not just loud, they are strategic. A drill instructor knows exactly what they are doing in every single interaction. When they get in a recruit's face and scream about a wrinkle in a uniform or a misaligned footlocker, it is not because they genuinely care about that wrinkle in isolation. It is because they are training the recruit's nervous system to function under extreme stress. To think clearly when someone is screaming at them, to execute tasks correctly when their hands are shaking and their heart is pounding, because that is what combat demands. There are typically 3 drill instructors assigned to each recruit platoon. The senior drill instructor, who is the most experienced and who carries the ultimate responsibility for that platoon's success, and 2 or more junior drill instructors who handle the day-to-day training load. The senior drill instructor is a figure of almost mythological presence in the minds of the recruits. They are not always screaming. Sometimes they speak quietly. And somehow, when they speak quietly, it is more frightening than the screaming. Because a quiet drill instructor in Phase 1 means you have done something so wrong that the normal level of intensity is not sufficient to address it. Let us talk about something that does not get discussed enough when people talk about Marine boot camp. The mental game is just as hard as the physical game, maybe harder for some recruits. Because the physical stuff, the running, the push-ups, the obstacle courses, those things hurt and they are exhausting, but you can understand them. You can see the finish line, you can count the repetitions, but the mental pressure of Phase 1 has no visible finish line. The constant scrutiny, the inability to make a single personal choice, the sleep deprivation, the disorientation, the total isolation from everything familiar, those things operate on a different level. And they target the parts of a person that physical training cannot reach. Recruits in Phase 1 begin to question themselves in ways they never have before. Questions they would never have asked themselves at home start rising to the surface. Am I actually capable of this? Am I tough enough? Did I make a terrible mistake? And the way each recruit answers those questions, the way they respond to that internal pressure, is as important to the Marine Corps as whether they can run 3 miles or knock out 50 pull-ups. Because the Marine Corps is not just building bodies, it is building minds. It is building a particular kind of mental architecture, one that does not collapse when conditions become extreme, one that can absorb punishment and keep functioning, one that can be beaten down and still choose to get back up. And that architecture is not constructed by comfort. It is constructed by sustained, structured adversity. Phase 1 is the first layer of that construction. There is a moment in Phase 1 that many veterans describe as a turning point, even if they did not recognize it as such at the time. It is the moment when the recruits stop individually trying to survive and begin instinctively working together. It happens at a different time for different platoons, but it always happens. A recruit helps another recruit square away their gear without being asked. Someone covers for a bunkmate who is struggling to keep pace. The platoon starts moving together in a way that is not just drilled compliance but genuine cohesion. And the drill instructors, who notice absolutely everything, see it happening. They do not say anything about it. They do not reward it with praise, but they push a little bit differently after that, because they know the platoon is beginning to become something real. Week 4 is when the character of the experience begins to shift, not because the training gets easier. It does not get easier, but because the recruits have survived the initial assault of Phase 1 and something in them has changed as a result. The people who are going to quit have largely quit by now. The people who remain have passed through a psychological filter that has shown them something about themselves. They are still exhausted. They are still under constant pressure. But they are beginning to move with more confidence. They are beginning to trust the process, even if they cannot articulate why. Phase 2 of Marine Corps recruit training is sometimes called the technical phase because it is where the recruits begin learning the specific skills of a Marine infantryman. And the centerpiece of Phase 2, the event that defines it, is the rifle range. The Marine Corps has a saying that has been part of its culture for generations. Every Marine is a rifleman first. It does not matter if you are going to be a cook or a lawyer or a communications specialist or a helicopter pilot. Before you are any of those things, you are a Marine, and a Marine knows how to shoot. The rifle training in Phase 2 is intense, detailed, and remarkably technical. Recruits spend days in dry fire practice before they ever fire a live round. They learn every component of their service rifle, the M16A4 or the M4 carbine depending on the depot and the era. They learn to disassemble it and reassemble it in the dark. They learn sight alignment, trigger control, breath management, natural point of aim. They learn the physics of ballistics at ranges from 200 to 500 yards, and then they go to the range. Qualification day at the rifle range is one of the most significant days in recruit training. Every recruit must qualify. There are 4 possible scores: marksman, sharpshooter, expert, and failing to qualify. A recruit who fails to qualify does not graduate with their platoon. They are held back for remedial training and given additional opportunities, but the stigma of not qualifying, of being the person who could not shoot straight, is a powerful motivator, and the Marine Corps knows it. Most recruits qualify. Many exceed their own expectations. And for a lot of young men and women who have never held a rifle in their lives, the experience of learning to shoot accurately at 500 yards with iron sights is a revelation. It is proof of something. It is proof that the training works, that if you follow the process, trust the instruction, and execute the fundamentals, you can do things you had no idea you were capable of. And that lesson generalizes. The recruits carry it with them into everything else that Phase 2 demands. Phase 2 also covers the Crucible's precursor events, the hikes that become progressively longer and harder with each passing week. The recruits hike with full combat loads, rifles, packs, gear, and water, covering distances that start at several miles and build toward double digits. The hikes are timed, the hikes are graded, and the hikes hurt in ways that are difficult to describe to someone who has never done them. Blisters form and pop and form again. Shoulders ache from pack straps. Feet develop problems that would send most civilians to a podiatrist. And the recruits keep walking, because stopping is not an option, because the Marine next to them is hurting too, and stopping would be letting them down. And that, right there, is the mechanism the Marine Corps has been building toward since arrival night. It is no longer about individual survival, it is about the person next to you. Phase 2 also introduces water survival training for recruits at Parris Island. The Marine Corps has a swim qualification requirement that catches many recruits completely off guard, particularly those who come from landlocked states and have limited swimming experience. The water survival training is not just about swimming. It is about functioning in the water with equipment, about maintaining composure when your body is fighting to stay afloat, about trusting your training when your instincts are screaming at you to panic. And for recruits who are not strong swimmers, this phase of training is often the hardest thing they face in all 13 weeks. Not because of the physical demand, but because fear of water is one of the deepest and most irrational fears a human being can carry, and the Marine Corps asks them to face it directly. Recruits who cannot meet the swim qualification work with instructors until they can. The Marine Corps does not simply fail you and move on, it trains you until you are capable, because the goal is not to filter out weakness, the goal is to eliminate it. To take whatever limitation a recruit brought through the gate and systematically address it until it is no longer a limitation. That philosophy applies to every aspect of recruit training. Physical weakness, technical deficiency, mental fragility, all of it is identified, targeted, and addressed. Not through compassion, but through structured, relentless repetition of the correct behavior until the incorrect behavior is no longer the default response. It is a kind of human engineering, and the Marine Corps has been refining its methods for so long that the results are remarkably consistent. Now let us talk about something that hangs over every single day of Marine recruit training from the first week to the last. Something that every recruit thinks about, fears, dreams about, and eventually confronts: the Crucible. The Crucible is the defining event of Marine Corps recruit training. It is a 54-hour field exercise conducted in the final weeks of boot camp, and it is the culmination of everything that has come before. Every hike the recruits have done, every push-up, every rifle drill, every sleepless night, every moment of grinding through exhaustion and self-doubt, all of it has been building toward this. The Crucible begins before dawn. The recruits march out into the field with their rifles and their packs and approximately 8 hours of sleep divided across the previous 2 nights. From that starting point, they will cover more than 40 miles on foot, complete more than 30 leadership and warrior stations, and do it all on rations that are deliberately insufficient for the caloric output they are demanding from their bodies. The Marine Corps is not trying to starve them. The Corps is recreating the fundamental experience of combat operations, the reality that in the field you will be hungry, you will be tired, you will be operating on the edge of your physical capacity, and you still have to complete the mission. The warrior stations during the Crucible are not obstacle courses in the conventional sense. They are problem-solving events, scenarios that require the platoon to work together, to communicate, to lead, to follow, to overcome obstacles that cannot be solved by individual effort no matter how physically capable that individual might be. The events are named after Medal of Honor recipients, Marines who gave their lives in the service of their country. And the recruits are told the story of each recipient before they attempt the event that bears their name. This is deliberate. This is the Marine Corps grafting the recruits into a lineage. You are not just doing an obstacle course, you are honoring someone who died for this country while wearing the same uniform you are about to earn. Sleep during the Crucible is almost non-existent. The recruits rotate through guard duty at night, which means that whatever minimal sleep they might get is fragmented, interrupted, and taken on the ground in whatever weather conditions exist at that moment. Harris Island in late summer can be brutally hot. In the fall and winter, temperatures drop. It rains, recruits get wet and stay wet for hours, and none of that stops the training. The Marine Corps does not cancel events for rain. The Marine Corps does not delay marches for cold, because neither does combat. The final march of the Crucible is legendary. It is called the Reaper, and it is a 9-mile march conducted in the early hours of the last day, following a night of almost no sleep after more than 40 miles of previous movement over the previous 2 days. The recruits march with full loads, their feet are destroyed, their legs are screaming, their bodies have been running on empty for hours, and they march in silence together, because this is the moment. At the end of that march, at the top of a hill, the senior drill instructors wait. And what happens next is one of the most emotionally powerful moments in all of American military training. The recruits who have not been called Marines, who have only been called recruits or worse for 13 weeks, stand in formation at the end of the Crucible. Their drill instructors look at them. And then, for the first time, the senior drill instructor calls them Marines. Veterans of Marine boot camp, people who have been through combat deployments and 30-year careers in things that would make most civilians lose sleep for a decade, will tell you that the moment their drill instructor first called them a Marine was one of the most profound moments of their lives. It is not an exaggeration. You can hear it in their voices when they talk about it, even decades later. Something happened on that hill that transcends the physical and the tactical. Something was created that is not easily explained and is essentially impossible to recreate outside of that specific context. The eagle, globe, and anchor is presented. The Marine Corps emblem, the symbol that distinguishes a Marine from every other person on the planet. The new Marines receive it from their drill instructors' hands, the same hands that have been in their faces for 13 weeks, the same voice that has been screaming at them since arrival night, and in that exchange the relationship changes completely. The drill instructor is no longer the enemy. They never were. They were the architect. They were building something, and what they have built is standing in front of them on that hill, exhausted and proud and fundamentally different from the person who stepped off that bus. But the story does not end on the hill, because after the Crucible, after the emotional power of that moment, the new Marines still have work to do. The days following the Crucible are sometimes called the Warrior Week period, and they include the administrative and formal processes of completing training, including the uniform inspection, the final physical fitness tests, the final academic tests, and the preparation for the event that their families have been waiting for since the day they shipped out. Graduation. Marine Corps graduation is a ceremony that carries enormous weight for everyone present. The families who come to watch their son or daughter, their brother or sister, their husband or wife walk across that parade deck have been through something themselves. 13 weeks of minimal contact. Brief phone calls in the first weeks that are often scripted and impersonal, intended to let the family know their recruit is alive but not designed to provide comfort or connection. Letters that arrive with odd timing and cryptic descriptions of training. And then the silence of the crucible week when families often hear nothing at all and simply wait. When those families see the recruit they dropped off at the processing station, when they see what has been returned to them, the reaction is often overwhelming. Because it is not the same person, the posture is different, the eyes are different, the way they carry themselves is different. Something has been added that was not there before, and there is no other word for it except presence. Marines carry themselves differently because they have been through something that most people have not, and they know it, and they wear it without arrogance but with unmistakable certainty. Now let us go deeper into the mechanics of what actually changes during those 13 weeks. Because understanding the surface events of boot camp, the hikes and the rifle range and the crucible only tells you part of the story. The real transformation happens in layers, and the deeper layers are the ones that last a lifetime. The first layer is physical. This one is the most visible and the most measurable. A recruit who arrives at boot camp and cannot run a mile without stopping will, 13 weeks later, run 3 miles in under 24 minutes with ease. A recruit who has never done a pull-up in their life will graduate doing 8 to 10 with good form. The cardiovascular fitness that is built in boot camp, the muscular endurance, the physical toughness, the simple ability to keep moving when your body is telling you to stop, all of that is real and it is significant, but it is the smallest part of the transformation. The second layer is technical. The new Marine knows how to shoot. They know how to navigate terrain with a map and compass. They know basic first aid. They know how to communicate in a military environment, how to follow orders in the chain of command, how to maintain their equipment, how to function within the framework of a military unit. These skills are practical and specific, and they matter enormously in the operational environment. But they are also the second smallest part of the transformation. The third layer is the one that matters most and the one that is hardest to explain. It is the identity layer, and what happens in this layer is the entire point of everything else. Before Marine boot camp, a recruit's identity is fundamentally individual. Who am I? What do I like? What do I want? How do I feel? The self is the center of everything, as it is for most people in a civilian context. The Marine Corps does not condemn that identity. It does not destroy it for the sake of destruction. It relocates it. It takes that individual identity and places it within a larger framework. The Marine Corps shifts the fundamental question from who am I to what are we, and what are we responsible for. By the end of boot camp, a new Marine's sense of self is inseparable from their sense of belonging to the Corps. And that belonging is not passive. It is not a bumper sticker affiliation. It is a deep and genuine conviction that they are part of something larger than themselves, something that existed before them and will exist after them, something that demands a standard of behavior and capability that they are now committed to meeting every day. The phrase, once a Marine, always a Marine, exists because this identity layer does not dissolve when the uniform comes off. It becomes a permanent feature of the person's internal landscape. Let us talk about some of the specific challenges within boot camp that veterans consistently identify as the hardest moments. Not the hardest in terms of physical demand, but the hardest in terms of what they reveal about a person. The quarterdeck is a term that refers to a specific physical punishment space where drill instructors send recruits who have made mistakes or who need additional motivation. Being sent to the quarterdeck means extended, intense physical exercise, push-ups and mountain climbers and flutter kicks and burpees administered by a drill instructor who is not going to stop until they are satisfied. For most recruits, the quarterdeck is a regular feature of Phase 1. And the experience of going there, of being singled out, of having to perform in front of your platoon while exhausted, is deeply uncomfortable. Not just physically but emotionally. It targets pride, it targets the ego, and in doing so it teaches something essential, that the ego is a vulnerability, that the ability to absorb humiliation without breaking, to take the correction and come back stronger, is not weakness. It is an advanced form of mental toughness. The moment a recruit decides on the quarterdeck that they are going to outlast whatever the drill instructor throws at them, that they are not going to quit, that they are going to get through this and come out the other side, is a moment of real growth. Not because the push-ups built muscle, but because the decision built something in the mind that was not there before. Another moment that veterans consistently identify as defining is the first time they were put in a leadership role within the platoon. Because leadership in Marine boot camp is not a comfortable experience. Recruit leadership positions like squad leader or guide are temporary and constantly rotated, and they come with a very specific burden. When your squad fails, you fail. When your platoon makes a mistake, the guide answers for it. You are suddenly responsible not just for your own performance but for the performance of people around you. And managing that responsibility, learning to communicate clearly under stress, learning to hold people to a standard while maintaining their trust, learning to accept accountability for collective failure, those are things that no classroom ever fully teaches. They are learned by doing them badly and then being corrected and doing them again. The guide, the recruit who carries the platoon flag and represents the platoon in all formal settings, occupies a position that is simultaneously prestigious and absolutely brutal. Because the guide is always visible, always accountable, and always the first person the drill instructor looks at when something goes wrong. Marines who were guides in boot camp often say it was the most educational 3 months of their professional lives. There is also the matter of the Uniform Code of Military Justice Instruction, the hours of classroom learning that recruits undergo throughout boot camp. This is not the exciting part of the training. This is not the part that makes it into movies or documentaries, but it is essential, because the Marine Corps is not just building fighters. It is building members of a legal and ethical framework, people who will be given weapons and authority and who must understand the rules that govern their use of both. The UCMJ instruction, the ethics training, the values education, all of it is woven throughout the 13 weeks. It is not separate from the physical training. It is part of the same construction project. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. It is the Marine Corps motto, and it is not just a slogan. By the time a recruit reaches graduation, that phrase carries genuine meaning. They understand it not as a concept but as an experience. They have been faithful to the training when they wanted to quit. They have been faithful to their platoon mates when it cost them personally. They have been faithful to a standard that they did not fully understand when they arrived, and that they now carry inside them. The motto is not taught, it is lived into. The drill instructors themselves deserve a deeper examination, because they are the most misunderstood figures in the entire story of Marine boot camp. From the outside, a drill instructor looks like someone whose job is to yell at recruits and make their lives miserable. And if you reduce it to the surface behavior, you can see why someone might draw that conclusion. But that conclusion is completely wrong. A Marine drill instructor is a volunteer. In the Corps, becoming a drill instructor is an assignment that requires a specific application, a competitive selection process, and an incredibly demanding training pipeline of its own. Drill instructor school at Parris Island or San Diego is its own crucible, a training program that takes already experienced Marines and prepares them for one of the most demanding jobs in the military. The attrition rate in DI school is significant. Not every Marine who tries to become a drill instructor makes it through. Those who do emerge from that training as something exceptional. They know the 13 weeks of recruit training at a level of granular detail that most people cannot imagine. They know every event, every inspection standard, every test requirement, every psychological stage of the recruit's development. They are not winging it. They are executing a precise and proven program with expertise that comes from years of experience both as Marines in the operating forces and as instructors in the recruit training environment. The drill instructor's yelling is a tool. The physical correction is a tool. The relentless pressure is a tool. And the best drill instructors are masters of calibration. They know when to push harder and when the platoon needs a different kind of pressure. They know which recruits are struggling with what specific challenges. They know when a recruit is close to breaking and what that recruit needs in that moment to come back from the edge rather than fall over it. The goal is never to destroy a recruit. The goal is to show the recruit exactly where their limit is and then help them push that limit further than they believed possible. Former drill instructors, looking back on their time on the drill field, almost universally describe it as the most meaningful work of their Marine Corps careers. Because they got to watch week after week the transformation that boot camp creates. They got to be the instrument of that transformation. They got to stand on that hill at the end of the crucible and call young men and women Marines for the first time. And they will tell you that it never got old. Not once. Not after the 100th time they did it. Let us talk about something that has changed significantly in Marine boot camp over the decades, and that represents one of the most important evolutions in the history of the institution: the training of women. For most of the Marine Corps history, female recruits trained separately from male recruits at different facilities with different standards in some categories and with limited integration into the broader institution. That has been changing. Marine Corps recruit training has been in a period of evolution regarding gender integration, with the Corps moving toward integrated training for many phases of recruit development while maintaining certain separate elements. The debate around this topic is real and ongoing within the institution itself, and reasonable Marines with decades of experience disagree about the best path forward. But what is not debatable is that the women who graduate Marine Corps boot camp are Marines. Full stop. They have been through the same crucible. They have earned the same Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. They have been through a process that the vast majority of American men could not survive, and they have come out the other side as part of one of the most elite military institutions in the history of human civilization. Female drill instructors who have spent careers on the drill field will tell you that the transformation they see in the young women who go through their platoons is identical to the transformation described by any male drill instructor. The details differ. The biology differs in some respects, but the essential experience, the arrival as a civilian and the departure as a Marine, that is universal. Let us talk now about what happens after boot camp, because graduation is not the end of the transformation. It is actually just the completion of the first phase of something much larger. After graduation, Marines move on to what is called the School of Infantry for Infantry Marines, or Marine Combat Training for Non-Infantry Marines. These schools continue and deepen the training, applying the foundation that boot camp built to the specific demands of the operational environment. An infantryman will spend weeks learning small unit tactics, weapons employment, land navigation, and the full spectrum of the grunt's craft. A non-infantry Marine will spend weeks reinforcing combat skills before moving on to their specific military occupational specialty school. And in both cases, those Marines carry with them the thing that boot camp installed: the identity, the standard, the understanding that they are part of something that demands the best they have every single day. The Marine Corps has a phrase for this: the standard does not change. Wherever a Marine goes, whatever their job, whatever the environment, the standard is the standard. And that standard was first established in their minds on arrival night, on the yellow footprints in the dark. The Marine Corps is also one of the smallest services, which creates a culture of intensity around its own identity that is different from the other branches. Marines are fiercely proud of what they are because they know what it cost them to become it. They know that not everyone can do what they did. They know that the training they went through is among the hardest entry-level military training programs in the world. And they carry that knowledge not as arrogance but as a kind of quiet certainty that those who have not been through it can recognize immediately, even if they cannot fully explain what they are sensing. Bond between Marines is also qualitatively different from many other social bonds, and it comes directly from the shared experience of boot camp. When two Marines who have never met find out they are both Marines, something happens. There is an immediate recognition, an immediate common ground, a shared language that does not require explanation, because they both know. They both went through it, they both stood on the yellow footprints, they both went to the quarter deck, they both made it through the crucible. And that shared experience creates a bond that transcends rank, time, geography, and all the other variables that usually determine whether two strangers connect. Veterans of the Marine Corps consistently rank their time in the Corps as one of the most formative experiences of their lives, often the most formative. Not because the Marine Corps was easy, precisely because it was not. Because it demanded everything and gave back something that cannot be bought, taught in a classroom, or acquired any other way. It gave them a version of themselves they did not know existed. And that version, tougher, more capable, more grounded, more connected to something larger than individual desire, is what they carry for the rest of their lives. Let us also address something that gets glossed over in most discussions of Marine Corps boot camp: the recruits who do not make it. The attrition rate in Marine Corps boot camp is real. It is not staggering by the standards of special operations selection programs, but it is significant. Some recruits leave because of injury. The physical demands of training, 13 weeks of sustained high-intensity physical activity, produce a meaningful number of stress fractures, soft tissue injuries, and medical issues that require a recruit to be recycled into a later class to allow for healing and recovery. Being recycled, being set back, is its own profound psychological experience. The recruit must watch their platoon graduate without them, must start over with a new group of strangers, must rebuild relationships and trust and momentum from the beginning. And they must do it while carrying the knowledge of what they have already been through, which can be both a source of strength and a source of frustration that is difficult to manage. Some recruits leave because of performance failures. They cannot meet the physical standards. They cannot qualify on the rifle range after additional training. They cannot function within the institutional framework no matter how much effort they put in. These are not failures of character necessarily. Sometimes they are simply mismatches between what the Marine Corps requires and what a particular individual is capable of in a particular moment. The Corps does not apologize for its standards, and it does not lower them for individual cases. The standard is the standard. And some recruits leave by their own choice. They request to be discharged. And in the culture of Marine Corps recruit training, this is the hardest thing to admit, both to the drill instructors and to themselves. Because the drill instructors have in many ways been preparing the recruits from day one with a specific message. You can do this. You are capable of more than you know. Quitting is a choice, not an inevitability. And for a recruit to choose to leave in the face of that message is to make a statement about themselves that will follow them for a long time. No one who completes Marine boot camp ever regrets it. Not a single veteran of recruit training has ever looked back and wished they had quit. That is not an exaggeration. It is a consistent finding across every survey, every anecdote, every conversation with those who have been through it. The difficulty of the experience is inseparable from the value of the experience. You cannot get the second thing without the first, and everyone who earns the title of Marine understands that in their bones. There is one more thing that deserves significant discussion before we close this story. The role of history and tradition in Marine Corps recruit training, because it is not incidental, it is not decoration, it is structural. From the first days of boot camp, recruits begin learning the history of the Marine Corps, not as a dry academic exercise, but as a living framework that gives everything they're going through a context and a meaning that extends far beyond their individual experience. They learn about the Battle of Belleau Wood, where Marines earned the nickname Devil Dogs from the German soldiers they fought with such ferocity that the enemy gave them a name. They learn about Iwo Jima, about the flag raising on Mount Suribachi, about the 27 Medals of Honor awarded during that battle, more than any other single battle in American history. They learn about the frozen Chosin Reservoir, where Marines in Korea faced impossible odds in brutal cold, and fought their way out in one of the most remarkable military retreats in history. They learn about Vietnam and Fallujah, and the hills of Afghanistan and the streets of Iraq. And they learn the names of the Marines whose Medal of Honor citations are read aloud before the crucible events that bear those names. The names of Marines whose actions in impossible situations defined what the Corps means by the words courage and sacrifice. Because the Marine Corps is not just training the recruits to be warriors, it is drafting them into a story that began more than 2 centuries ago and that will continue long after every Marine alive today is gone. When a recruit earns the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, they are not just getting a pin, they are being formally accepted into that